Here, we will at this time call the meeting to order and ask the city clerk to please call roll.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Silva.
Present.
Mayor Villegas-Walker.
Here.
Councilmember Cardenas.
Present.
And Councilmember Sanders.
Here. At this time, if you could please stand for the invocation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would just ask that you would remain standing if you will. Our Heavenly Father, we come this morning. Our heads are bowed in humble submission to your will. We ask special blessings on those in attendance and those who are in the sound of my voice. Lord, we also ask that you would comfort the Calvin family in the loss of Peggy. Lord, we also ask that you would comfort all of those who may be in need. As we go through our deliberations this morning, we ask a special blessing on us individually and collectively. This is our prayer. In your Son's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. At this time, we'd ask our city attorney to report out on closed session, which began at 8:30 this morning.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On a motion by Councilmember Silva, second by Councilmember Sanders, the City Council met in closed session at 8:30 a.m. and all council members were present. A report was given to the council on the anticipated litigation item. There is no action to report, but direction was given to staff, and closed session concluded at 8:47 a.m. And that completes my report.
Thank you. At this time, we will consider new business item number 1, which is a discussion and any necessary action regarding the letter of intent between the City of El Centro and Pioneers Memorial Healthcare District. At this time, I'm going to ask perhaps our 2 representatives to the El Centro Regional Medical Center Board of Trustees to comment on the meeting that was held last night. There was a joint meeting held last night with the Pioneers Memorial Healthcare District Board of Trustees and ECRMC Board of Trustees. So I'll start with Mr. Silva and then Ms. Sanders.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You are correct. The both hospital boards met last night, and the action of the approval of the letter of intent was passed unanimously by both boards. A lot of compliments from myself and other people on behalf to the task force that worked diligently and staff to put this together. In my comments, I called that a historic day for the benefit of our citizens, because I really believe that this time around we are going to finalize the affiliation and bring a third party in that would ultimately improve the health care of our citizens. So it was very positive. Again, unanimous votes from Pioneers Board as well as El Centro Regional Board. And here we are today to finalize that action.
Thank you, Mr. Silva. Ms. Sanders?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I would concur with Mr. Silva, and the takeaway is that there is a view, at least from my perspective and from those that were in attendance, that this is an opportunity to expand healthcare opportunities for not only the residents of El Centro, but for the entire county.
Thank you. We'll ask our remaining council members if there's comments. Mr. Jackson and Mr. Cardenas.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Only that, this is certainly an eventful day for the citizens of Imperial County. I believe that this is not just about El Centro, but this is about the North End and every place else in Imperial County to come under one roof and have basically a healthcare system that can service, our residents and bring a better quality service to those residents. And I think that's what we're here to do today. I commend the board members of PMH and El Centro Regional in their task last night, and ready to get to work here on our level and make this a final obstacle to overcome and start working to get this thing done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to echo Councilmember Jackson's comments, I agree, and I also want to just share, I really appreciate the leadership of Pro Tem Councilmember Silva and also Councilmember Sanders for their support in putting this together. Also want to recognize our mayor and her help and her support and her leadership on the task force. This is not easy stuff. There's a lot of work behind the scenes. I'm very happy to report that there's a very strong timeline in place with goals and objectives that are going to be monitored with tremendous amount of scrutiny. So I'm just really glad and grateful that we have this strong plan in place. And not only that, but the leadership behind this is also an incredible group of folks. So I'm excited about this opportunity and look forward to hearing what's coming down the pipeline as this thing moves forward. But again, grateful to the folks on the north end as well and their support. So very excited about this.
Thank you. So I've been a member of the El Centro City Council since 1997, and I have a handful of moments that I would define as defining moments, and this is one of them. I think that for a long, long time, we have worked on, strived for, tried, come close, attempted this affiliation. And the fact that we're actually going to be successful in moving it forward, I really see this as a legacy of this council and of both hospital boards. Today is a day that's going to define the quality of healthcare in this valley for decades to come. This is the right direction. It's the right time for us to stop the competition and to come together collectively, collaboratively, to work for the betterment of our entire region when it comes to healthcare. I applaud the courage of the hospital boards to take this leap of faith in moving forward with the affiliation. I applaud staff. I see David Green here in the audience. I applaud staff for their leadership, for their ability to articulate that the time is now for us to move this forward. Healthcare is a very, very difficult industry, and it's been made even more difficult with the challenges associated with the Affordable Care Act, with the struggles that we have as a rural region to attract and retain talent. This affiliation has, in my view, nothing but upside for this valley. And I see this as a legacy moment for all of us. And with that, I would like council's indulgence to be the one to make the motion to approve the letter of intent between the City of El Centro and Pioneers Memorial Healthcare District relating to the proposed affiliation.
Second.
Have a motion by Walker, second by Silva. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yay. All right. Sorry, it's going to be a little anticlimactic after that, Mr. Hagan, but you're up next.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. We're here to look at the water conservation measures that the State Water Resource Control Board has implemented and requested all cities to implement. Fiscal impact, be a minimal impact to the general fund, potential minimum income generation via the fines, and then additional costs for printing information flyers, door hangers, and bill inserts up to a couple $1,000s. On January 17th, the governor issued a proclamation for all Californians to reduce water usage by 20%. On July 15th, the Water Resources Control Board adopted a resolution implementing emergency regulations for statewide urban water conservation. Yesterday, final approval was given by the Office of Administrative Law, and the emergency regulation is effective now for 270 days and may be reduced or renewed by the state prior to its expiration. Okay, the adopted board resolution modifies the water code, requires water retailers such as El Centro to activate its water shortage contingency plan to a stage that requires mandatory water reductions. El Centro's water shortage contingency plan, contained in our urban water management plan, the 2010 plan, and it was adopted by council in 2011, does not provide an adequate, appropriate intermediate stage that would comply with the newly created state drought emergency regulation. Instead, our plan deals with catastrophic events and responds by activating strong mandatory reductions in water and stopping issuance of new construction permits, among other measures. The plan is due for update in 2015, and staff will incorporate appropriate stages at that time and reduce and have water consumption consistent with a drought scenario. The January proclamation requires water retailers to reach a 20% reduction from 2013, so they're comparing this year with last year's values. We have not met the 20% reduction to date. Currently, as of June 30th, our cumulative water reduction is only 4% from last year. If we reach a 20% reduction, the January proclamation implies that we may develop our own progressive enforcement practices to encourage conservation. So these are the new requirements for the state code. I'll go down them 1 through 5. First one is no runoff of water to adjacent properties or the street during water application for landscape, and that's already a city ordinance. The use of a hose, number 2, use of a hose that dispenses potable water to wash your car, unless it's you have to have a shut-off nozzle at the end of the hose. The application of water to driveways and sidewalks is prohibited. And 4, the use of potable water in a fountain or decorative water feature is prohibited unless it's recirculated. And 5, which is probably the toughest one of all, limiting watering of lawn and landscapes to twice per week or comparable water reducing measures. And I might point out that this does not restrict how many times those 2 days you water your lawn. To make this easy for enforcement, we've divided the city on 8th Street, east and west. On the west side, people can water Mondays and Thursdays. On the east side, Tuesdays and Fridays. Other cities have used like odd and even addresses. This is going to be much easier. Our city manager suggested this, and it's much easier to enforce and track. Okay, well, starting in the month of August, September 15th, I'm going to have to start reporting last year's consumption and this year's consumption, monthly consumption. And what I've done here, the graph, the blue, this is a graph where the blue lines are the last year's production, water production based on months, January through December. And then we have 2014, January through June. And what I've done here, the percent decrease, I've got this in a graph here next, but we're hitting right now, the last couple of months, we've hit in the 7% range compared to last year's, like May would be 2013, the month of May, versus 2014, the month of May and June as well. And then I did a cumulative decrease, and forgive the number of decimal points here, but we're up to almost 4%. Now, this is the graph showing the monthly trend, and in January we did increase, but then February we dropped down, and we've continued to drop down, and we're down in the 7 percentile range. So we should be at the 20% range, though. And then starting October 15th, I'm going to have to also report the per capita consumption, and this is a very, I'm going to say it's not a really accurate number because we're taking total water production, and that includes industry, businesses, and everything else, and we're dividing it by our population. So depending on how much business the city has, it's going to increase the amount. But anyway, we do have a trend here. This is from 2001, of 203 gallons per person per day, down to 154, and this is an average here of 185. So we do have a slight trend down, and I will have to start reporting that starting October 15th.
But Mr. Hagan, the problem I have with a lot of these numbers, I mean, what do they tell you? You can lie really well with statistics and graphs and charts, and our per capita is one number, but during the day, because we are the center of commerce, the center of government, the center of our court system, our per capita number isn't really a per capita number because we increase dramatically.
That's right.
So it really doesn't make sense for us to say, here's our water usage and then divide it by number of people that live here, because, I mean, there can be this great distinction between who lives here and who's actually here for
During
the
the
greater
day.
part of the day.
I agree 100%.
So
I
do we
believe
get to make
the-
a footnote in our numbers somewhere?
Absolutely.
Okay,
And
all right.
I believe the key numbers are going to be where you compare 2013 month of August versus 2014 month of August.
And how do you account for, how does the state expect us to account for growth?
That's in
as
the
more
popular-
homes get built, as more commerce, gets developed, as more industrial, gets developed, how do you account for that?
We can only account for our population change, and it's only been a slight increase.
Wow.
And see, what's happening statewide with this whole water consumption and the drought and everything else, you have these cities and regions that are calling for an absolute moratorium on building. Well, if you want to stall out the economy, you stop building, either homes or attracting new businesses or something else. So this is really kind of operating at cross purposes, because people are saying, why are we continuing to build if we're in a state of drought and don't have enough water for our own residents? All right, well, why
That's
don't we
right.
have you have a few more slides here? Oh, perfect.
Questions?
All right, so, Ms. Sanders, do you have
Well,
comments or questions?
well, I have, first I'll start with comments. One of the things that the Valley, meaning El Centro or Imperial County, have always touted itself for was that we had lots of water, land, and labor force. And so we're seeing that those resources are shifting as a result of this. However, I agree with you, Madam Mayor, the numbers are going to be skewed as we begin to look at how we're going to actually track this. And then I noticed that there's housing starts, or there are wannabe housing starts, and that's going to put quite a damper on things, I think. Now, the question is, Mr. Hagan, is after you submit all of this information and data to whom? To the regional water or to the state?
It's, well, the same. It's the state.
Okay. And then what happens with the information? Do they come back and say, well, you've met that, and so you continue on that pathway with what you're doing, or it's not restrictive enough and you need to come back and make some adjustments?
We're not sure.
Oh, okay.
We believe if we hit the 20% goal that we'll be fine,
Okay.
but we're not really sure.
The final question, Madam Mayor, I noticed in our map it's black and white and it's not very good. So when we send these flyers out and whatever we put into the mailers, we'll have something a little bit better, perhaps in color, to assist the residents of knowing exactly where the boundaries are and if they're going to water on which even or odd days?
Yes, and it'll be on our city website as
Okay.
well,
All right. Thank you. That's my
both
question.
English and Spanish.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, these are definitely some challenging times when it comes to water. So I really appreciate also your leadership in this, Mr. Hagan. It's some tough business to deal with currently. I guess my questions were related to the city and the impact they'll have on our parks. I mean, our city as well is going to be limited to the amount of times that they can water Buckland Park and some of these other parks as well. Those also apply to us? Is that correct?
That's how we interpret that,
Right.
these
So.
laws.
So potentially Buckland Park would only be watered 2 days a week,
That's correct.
and we're making arrangements to implement that. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, great. And then in terms of schools as well, I'm sure that, are we reaching out to them schools as well in terms of them watering their campuses, and have they shared any concerns, any grievances about that at all, or?
We haven't gotten any responses yet, but we will be reaching out to all businesses, schools
Great.
as well.
And then just a couple more. The plan is only as good as the education and enforcement. So I know that there was some enforcement plans there, but I mean, how are we going to handle the overall enforcement of this? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, well, code enforcement out of community development will be handling the enforcement of it. We'll also have MyGov, where people can report a neighbor that's not following the rules. So it's going to be a process where and it's a learning process for the
Right.
city too, as we gear up for this.
Right, okay. And then the last one, I mean, have other cities as well, are they in the works? Are they adopting ordinances in regards to water conservation as well?
Throughout the entire state, yes, and there is a website that indicates what some of the other cities are doing.
Great, all right. Thank you, Mr. Hagan.
Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan?
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I mean, and I understand the issue with water conservation, but as you pointed out on your report, Mr. Hagan, even if we're successful in accomplishing our 20% reduction, the overall impact of water conservation valley-wide is minimal, because 97% of the water is used for agriculture purposes. So, this is something that we have to do, I guess.
Yes, it is.
You also pointed out that there's penalties for the city if we do not adopt this.
$10,000 a day.
$10,000 a day. I do hope that as we begin to implement this, because we have to, that a good public campaign goes out to people so that people can understand this, that there's a mechanism for warnings before penalties get assessed to people.
That's correct.
So that everyone understands what we have to do to accomplish this. I don't like it. Our hands are tied. This is something that we have to do, but again, yeah, the overall impact is negligible as it relates to water conservation.
That's right.
Yeah, I concur with Mr. Silva. I'm not a fan of this either, especially when you look at the percentages and what we actually can save if we do hit our numbers. I guess a couple of my questions is that in reference to the date of July 28th, which is yesterday, I guess, when they actually passed the 270-day mark, or implementation of the 270 days, is that the point from which we go forward on the 20%? Because you've been talking about cumulative numbers, and I'm just wondering, does the clock stop or start yesterday? Is that what we're looking at?
It would start for the month of August, 1st of August. So
okay.
On September 15th, I will have to report the total water production for this month versus 2013 August.
So looking at your numbers over the last two reporting periods, we're down an average of about 7% year or from 2013.
That's correct.
So basically, we're looking at needing to accomplish about another 13%.
Yes.
So it's not as daunting as it seems as when we're talking about cumulative of the year for 4%, needing to go up to 20. Okay.
And I would say about over 50% of all the water produced is for landscaping, for outside use.
Mm-hmm. In reference to our parks, and I see Mr. Lagakis is in the audience. We're right in the middle of a redo at Swarthout, and in a conversation I had with Chris yesterday, what does that do for our planting? And we're just getting ready to start an overseed with that new field. Are we putting that on the shelf? Are we trying to move forward? Are we looking at a different irrigation system to flood, or how are we doing this?
Well, there's two-step process. One is, you're right, parks get no special exemption. We, with our city attorney, look to find that exemption. For particularly Reconstructed Park, we have two of them, Carlos Aguilar and Swarthout. There is no exemption for that. Ms. Piedra has, our Economic Development Director has contacted our senator, state senator, and we've called for a meeting to discuss getting that exemption in there. By the way, there's an exemption for all the other points on that list except the 2-day watering. But you can water without restriction off the irrigation canal. Now, you know, we get our water at our plant from the irrigation canal. So that's why this is a bit frustrating for us. So we think perhaps there may be an alternative for Carlos Aguilar Park. Swarthout Park, we have not worked out that plan yet. We cannot plant that grass on a 2-day watering. But we cannot also leave it the way it is. So we're very frustrated. Terry or Chris, you want anything else on that?
Let's have him finish this thought, and then we'll.
You have to come to the podium, Chris. Can't get out of it. And we're looking at some even alternatives of even trucking the water.
Well, what's the worst thing that happens if we just go ahead and do it?
You're
Fined.
Well, there's fines.
Well,
from the state.
potentially though, but if we're saving in other areas
There's
to make up that number,
There is a strict prohibition on the watering of more than 2 days a week.
it's ridiculous.
And then, by the way, that's the same board that gives us our water permit for our water plant.
But according to the language put forth by the state, we can actually water for 24 hours for those 2 days.
Oh, yes.
It's totally ridiculous. So you can water
As long as
as
it
long
doesn't
as you want, as
overflow.
many times as you want over those 2 days, as long as it doesn't overflow, or yeah, which in this case I doubt it would, because we just redid all that. We need to
But
get
Chris-
it ground wet.
Okay,
but-
so what's the plan?
You know, we don't have a plan. The plan we had is now on hold.
Okay.
To plant Bermuda grass requires a enormous amount of water for 3 to 4 weeks until the root has developed and taken hold and goes down about 6 inches. In order to maintain a 6-inch moisture level, you would irrigate for, let's say on Monday, go back 24 hours later, dig down 6 inches, and determine if you have enough moisture at that level to decide if you have to increase or decrease your watering. Initially, that's off the table. You have to water consistently. You can flood Bermuda grass and keep it flooded for a month, and it will not hurt it. It will thrive. To irrigate twice a week in a regular residential area, I think is doable, especially if you have multiple watering times a day. In an athletic field situation, it will not work.
Okay, so this is absolutely positively the problem with a one-size-fits-all regulation. So, Mr. Duran, what is the city going to do so that we can move forward with these projects?
We're going to be requesting a change in the water, in that water proclamation
Okay.
that allows for parks that are under construction.
Okay.
There is a special section in that proclamation, or that resolution from the Water Board, if they were going to violate some other state action. And we went after looking at this as a PM10 issue for the park that we have at Swarthout, except that section doesn't provide for the 2-day watering. We're going to be asking that they add that for reconstructed parks, because we're going to have nothing but PM10 issues. But we think possibly for one of the parks, though, we think we have for Carlos Aguilar, we may be able to get it off the canal. But there is not a solution at this point
Okay.
where we can bring enough water in to Swarthout. We need to get a rewrite.
Okay, there's strength in numbers, so we need to see if there's other cities, jurisdictions, even outside of Imperial County, that have a similar need, and see how we move forward collectively so that we can get this exemption. Because I agree with everyone here, this one-size-fits-all implementation, it doesn't work. And we're now launching at a point in time where we're at our absolute peak in terms of water usage, right? I mean, heading into August, that's when our numbers spike. All of the other stuff makes sense, and we can tell people, you know, only run your dishwasher when it's full, only do full loads of laundry, use a broom instead of a hose. Don't let your hose just run if you're washing your car. But when it comes to grass and landscaping in this area, that it makes absolutely no sense. So this is how I envision what we're going to be doing. We're going to have code enforcement out there citing people who are allowing their water to run, for multiple days to keep their grass green. So they'll get a citation from code enforcement. Their next door neighbor who's trying to follow the rules on their landscaping and only water twice, their lawn is dead, it looks awful, so they're going to get cited by code enforcement for all of the dead and dying landscaping that they have. This makes absolutely no sense.
And we're going to have a lot of people at our next council meeting.
Well, think of it this way, folks. The investment that all of us have in our landscaping, the investment that businesses have in their landscaping. So I think, Mr. Duran, we need to not only talk about a park exemption, but how about an exemption for any jurisdiction until the temperature drops below 75 degrees? I mean, let's make something reasonable. You can't enforce water restrictions in a desert area as you would in a coastal region. It makes no sense. So why don't they do some science behind it and say, all right, you know what? As soon as it drops below 75 degrees, then you guys have to pony up and live within these restrictions. But as long as it's 110 degrees outside, you guys go ahead and keep watering as long as it's not running onto the sidewalk. So I think we have to ask for a lot more, not just for the parks. Yes,
I
sir.
might also say that in trying to adhere to the 2 days a week, let's take a Sunflower Park, an established park.
Right,
If I put water in that thing for 24 hours on Monday,
yeah,
and I water again Thursday, it won't be able to be played on until Thursday
right,
with that much water to
Right.
keep the grass on.
yeah.
And I'm glad Chris brought this up, because part of what I've asked Ms. Brownlee to take a look at, working staff, we're getting ready to start leagues. We will not have, we're going to reduce the capacity of our fields, and we're going to have to implement there's a policy that you've adopted years ago about priorities of leagues. That has to be implemented. We're going to be losing 2 to 3 days a week out of our field use.
Can't do it.
Absolutely. Or you'll have dirt.
Well,
I'm going to
okay,
give you
so
that.
Then you
this
run
makes
into
it,
This is why it's
makes
just so
it,
frustrating.
this makes it all that much more important that we're on the phone now to figure this out. Because really, we're going to implement water restrictions that affect our kids' ability to be participating in sporting athletic events and leagues. Makes absolutely no sense. So, to the extent that the council can get behind your efforts, political solutions, I think that that's absolutely where we want to go. Now, the one common sense approach that I think we can maybe get behind, we give collectively ideas to people on how to reduce the water usage. The stuff with the, full loads of laundry, run your dishwasher when it's full. But let's really start embracing landscaping alternatives where people can get the lawns replaced with something else. And maybe what we do is look for sometime in the fall where we can have a public workshop to talk about if people want to look at an alternative for something other than grass.
Sure.
So we can say we're approaching it that way in terms of overall water reductions, but let's not have a draconian approach to water restrictions that don't work for a desert region like ours.
I think, if I may, Madam Mayor, just to piggyback on your comments, I did talk to a council member from San Antonio, and they've been dealing with the drought for 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so any policy or any idea that we're coming up with, it needs to encompass some sort of midterm and long-term goals as well, because there may be potential of no end in sight in the very near future. So the council member that I was talking to in San Antonio, they've had that drought in Texas for 7 years, and even though they had record rainfall last year, they're still in a drought, and they're still having to deal with a lot of these issues. So there's no doubt that we're going to have some challenging times ahead, but we also need to start thinking midterm and long term when we come up with these policies and procedures.
I think collectively what I've heard is none of us are in favor of this. We are encouraging the city manager. We know, though, that our hands are tied and we need to move forward with the resolution. However, we want some very strong action taken by city staff for an explanation of our unique situation here.
Madam Mayor, I had
Madam Mayor,
a couple
Okay,
questions too.
And just to be mindful, I have to be somewhere at 9:30.
Oh, okay. Just a quick question. What are we doing on enforcement? Is there going to be warnings, or I'm just worried about somebody that has a broken sprinkler head not knowing it, and somebody calls or code enforcement sees it? How are we going to deal with those kind of problems?
As indicated in the report, first there's verbal warnings, letters, then we start getting into the citations and the fines. But the verbal and the letters, particularly, we're looking at closely in August because some folks may be gone a week and we may knock on a door. We have door hangers being printed. It still comes back to is we're going to be working with folks to get them educated this first month.
Okay.
And
quickly, the second question I had was, when it says that you can take water from irrigation, does that mean as a municipality, we could actually truck water from canals? And as long as it doesn't go through our monitoring system?
Well, let's start off, is our water plant gets the
'Cause it
water
sounds
from the
that way.
canal. Yeah, what it says is that we cannot use potable water more than 2 days a week on ornamental lawns and landscaping. That's why we find this very frustrating, because we're talking about the same origin of the water being treated differently.
And can you think of the increased cost of having to truck water over
So
simply
the answer
because of
is,
this?
yeah, you can do those
crazy
things.
regulation?
As an individual who may have irrigation system from the IED on their lawns, they can also use that water plus the 2 days.
I was just looking at that as a potential alternative for our parks if we need to. I mean, I don't want to see our parks die, and I certainly don't want to see our kids suffer that we can't, that we have to decrease our teams because we can't use fields. So I'm wondering if that's, I know there'd be a huge expense to the city on that, but I'm just wondering what that expense would be and how, possible that is.
Yeah, we're looking at 5,000 gallon trucks. We'd have a caravan of trucks going to the parks. Chris?
It's not practical.
It's not practical.
Okay, all right.
And that's why
Water weighs 8.37 pounds per gallon, 5,000 gallon capacity. You'll have ruts in the field that deep.
There we go. And then we get to resurface our roads.
Great.
Any other quick?
Well, I know you have to leave, Madam Mayor, so I wondered if it would be appropriate. I will just reserve this comment, and when we meet, the first meeting in August, and we can continue to discuss this issue.
And for the first meeting in August, we can get an update as to where we are, some of the political efforts that the mayor suggested. Also, I'd like to get a sense of the information campaign and how that's going to roll out to make sure that our citizens understand all this.
So at this point, we'd look for a motion to approve resolution number 14-78, resolution City Council, City of El Centro approving water conservation measures in compliance with State Water Resources Control Board resolution number 2014-0038, with an update to be provided at our first meeting in August.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Cardenas, second by Sanders. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried 4-0. There's going to be a press conference at the Board of Supervisors with regard to the affiliation, and that starts at 9:30. So, off we go. Yeah, well, not too fast.
Can we get the chief desk orders?
Can I get an escort?